Hey everyone, I'm Jordan Sloggett, and welcome back to the Growing Guelph podcast. Today I'm sitting down with Mike and Linda Willis, a married couple who've seen firsthand how organ donation changes lives. Mike got a new heart when he needed it most, and Linda stepped up to donate a kidney. Now they're on a mission to get more people checking their donor status and making the choice to help save lives. Thanks for checking out this episode. Let's jump right to that conversation. Perfect. It doesn't help that I have 3 different microphone types as well, but it all should come through clear with only minimal road noise. But that's the joy of living on a busy street. All right. Well, Mike and Linda, thank you so much for joining me today on Growing Guelph. I know you have a really interesting, unique story and advocacy work that you've done from that. So I kind of just want to jump right into it. Mike, can you share the story of your heart transplant in 2015 and how it's impacted your life?
Well, early into 2014, Linda and I went out for a walk, and I just couldn't catch my breath. Went home eventually. It took a while, and I was kind of stubborn. Linda's laughing at this, but she knows what I mean. Called the doctor's office, and they suggested that the doctor wanted some tests done that couldn't be done at their office, and I should go to the emergency in Guelph. And so Linda dropped me off, found a wheelchair because I could barely catch my breath still. And
that's a scary feeling.
It was kind of scary at the time, but she got a wheelchair, spoke to, I'm not sure who even. I can't remember. I was too busy with other things, trying just to breathe and stay alive. And she said, "Can you look after him? I've got to move the truck. It's blocking your doorway." She came back within minutes, and I was already in the intensive room in emergency with paddles on my chest, just in case they needed to zap me. And I think you need to say some things about this.
Well, the fact that you did not want to call the doctor, you said, "Oh, I have an appointment next week," was some of the stubbornness of it. But yes, if you need attention, definitely the triage at emergency does come through. And yeah, I was back in and saw him with paddles on.
So what happened next? What was?
Well, they recommended I see a cardiologist, and through seeing him, they did just about every test you can think of on me. Wasn't even strong enough to do like a stress echo. I couldn't hardly keep up on a treadmill at the lowest speed on the flat. So. They did, I'm trying to think the name of it, but basically injected some radioactive isotopes in me to see how much blood my heart was able to pump out.
Yeah.
That was able to get them what they call the ejection fraction, the percentage of blood your heart pumps out.
Like with each beat?
Time. Yeah. And normal is somewhere 50, 55 to 70 range. Like your heart can't completely empty itself. And in my testing, as they continued testing me and trying to figure out what was wrong, it ended up to drop to below 8. Oh. So actually, funny story, a friend of mine's a trauma surgeon. Not in this area, but I see him at different racetracks around because he's often the racetrack doctor. And after I had my heart transplant, he said, "Did they ever tell you what the medical term for an ejection fraction below 8 is?" And I scratched my head and I thought, I don't remember hearing anything. He says, "Oh, it's very simple. It's called not conducive to life."
Medical terms have a way of being blunt to the point of, that was probably alarming to learn that, you were that close to...
He saved that till after transplant. Now he's doing well.
It's a wise choice.
Yeah.
So what was this was the initial, and sorry, continue. What was the journey like towards?
Well, I ended up in and out of emergency and stays in Guelph General. I'm trying to think if it was about the fourth time into emergency. The one doctor, again, I'd been seeing the cardiologist and he'd been doing different tests on me. And he said, so can you explain what your cardiologist has told you? And I said, well, with all the tests, he thought if nothing changes, and they'd tried different medications and all sorts of, I guess treatment is the right word, but nothing seemed to be doing anything. And he said, if nothing changes by the new year, which would be 2015, he said, we're going to send you down to Toronto for possible transplant. And you couldn't believe the look of relief on the emergency doctor's face. He said, yeah, I'm glad you realize that. We're waiting to find you a bed in Toronto. So again, then I got transferred down to Toronto by ambulance, and a nurse went with me, and basically keeping me stable on the trip down. And I was admitted there, and they started the workup for transplant. I think one of the first things they did is put a temporary pacemaker in me. And they had a few troubles getting that to work. I was awake, but kind of a little bit out of it at the time. And they're having trouble with the one lead going to where they wanted it to go. And I heard the doctor say something about turning it on to see if they'd be able to figure where it was. That might give them a better idea. And all I could feel, and the thing I thought was happening, is the nurse that was standing on my right-hand side kept poking me in the ribs for some reason. And it turns out it was the lead going off, and they were trying to get it to move into the right spot. And afterwards, I asked them, why was I getting poked? Nobody was poking you. If you felt something, that was the lead going off. And okay, that makes me feel much better. I thought I was just getting poked in the ribs. I tried to keep a good sense of humor. Some days more difficult than others, but while I was in, I'd talk to just about anyone who'd come into the room, give you an idea. The one cleaner who would come into the room, I'd always talk with her, ask her how the family was doing and everything. She ran into me in the hospital, had to be a year and a half later, said, I remember you. So I guess my bad sense of humor, but also my interest in people, made me memorable enough. But as I say, I was in and out of hospital. The transplant coordinator, the one time I went down, she says, we've got a room for you, and, we've got a great roommate. You're going to love Randy. And Randy and I really hit it off well, and we still stay in touch.
Oh, that's nice.
We get cards back and forth, phone calls around holidays and that. But I think we were good for each other.
Yeah.
We kept each other calm. We followed each other through transplant and beyond. It's been over 9 years for both of us, and so that was pretty great.
Well, that's good. I mean, so many through a tough trial and an ordeal, really, like a medical ordeal like this, through some of that fire. I think like new bonds can be forged that, if you were just waiting at the bank or something, or talking to someone, like it's like you're able to connect and forge bonds like that. And he's someone who's gone through something that few people have, but that you have that in common. So that's nice that you're able to forge new friendships and remain. positive, and I guess just being outwardly focused on other people and talking to people helps in those situations too, right?
Yeah. Since then, I was allowed to write a letter anonymously to my donor family, or my donor's family, and it goes through Trillium Gift of Life. Nothing can be mentioned about name, location, a whole bunch of things. If it was accidentally put in the letter, it would be deleted and that. But I sent a letter 1 year after transplant, and then sent another one 2 years after transplant. And after the second letter, the last mail delivery before Christmas that year, I received a reply from them, like from the family.
Was that an emotional letter to receive and to open up? And
I couldn't even read the whole thing at once. I had to just skim it and soak it in.
Yeah.
But all of his favorite foods were already my favorites. He read strange books just like I do. Everything about him except one thing fit. And that was, if you wanted him to show up for dinner at 6 o'clock, you would tell him that it was 4 o'clock and he'd still be late.
Yeah.
I'm ex-military. If you're not 5 minutes early, you're late.
Yeah.
And it to this day, it almost physically hurts if I'm running late. But the one big thing, he loved strong black coffee. And I had to go a year pre-transplant not being able to drink coffee because I was so fluid restricted. I was allowed 1.5 liters of liquid. That included soups, yogurt, fruits, anything that contained any amount of liquid.
Is that with to do with the sensitivity of your blood pressure at that point, and excess fluids can increase blood pressure, or like a fluid retention?
Fluid retention was the big thing. I had to be on a drug called Lasix, which would help remove fluids, and they would build up around the heart, the abdomen. Some people the legs, but for me it seemed strange. They'd come in and check every day, and no, nothing there. But I was definitely holding fluid in my chest and that. So that.
Well, Linda, I'd love to get your perspective of what that time period was like. If you'd like to share in terms of as a spouse watching your husband go through something like that. Is that?
It was scary.
Yeah.
In one word, it was scary.
Yeah.
But yeah, the fluid retention is very common with the congestive heart failure of any kind. And seeing him back and forth, I made friends with the firemen from Station 2, mainly, because they were the ones who responded to our house. Anytime you called 911, fire is normally dispatched with the ambulance, and they're normally there first. So it got to the point I'd either meet them in the driveway or at the front door. Here's his health card. Here's his med list. This is what's going on. And they go, can you come and help us at other calls? You need to educate people. But it's one of those, I've often had people say to me, are you a nurse? Because of what I had to go through and learn on my own to be an advocate for Mike as well. Most of the time we had really good service and good things happening, but the odd time there was something that just doesn't seem right, and I would voice my concern and be an advocate for him, because for that 1.5 to almost 2 years prior and a little bit after, he was in no shape to advocate for himself. So it's very important to have someone sort of in your corner that will advocate for you.
Yeah. I think it also, I mean, we're just at kind of the beginning of the story in terms of where this evolved for both of your work in advocacy, but I think it speaks to who you are as people, that was, before you can become an advocate for a larger cause, you had to be an advocate for him, and just taking on those responsibilities. And like you said, you were identified by the authorities early on as someone as like, oh, you should be helping other people for this. And that, I feel like that must have sowed a seed early on to what your advocacy work eventually became. But do you think that for both of you, and I don't know, Mike, if this speaks to your military background, but there's something to be said that like in an emergency, in a bad situation, some people panic and some people say like, okay, what do we have to do? What are the next steps? How do we get through this? And it sounds like that's kind of where you both went.
It got to the point that I knew by looking at him or by what was going on, if I had to call, or if, you could just go and have a snooze and then feel a little bit better after that. Sort of got to know sort of what was going on. Mm-hmm. I know from going through it myself, and that I'm very aware, and very often to this day, I reach out to the caregiver. People often ask how the person, like the patient, is doing, and they sort of overlook the caregiver.
Yeah.
And I make a point of asking the caregiver how they're doing, reminding them to ask for help if they need it, even if they don't need it, to give them a little bit of me time, and to make sure they look after themselves, because if they don't look after themselves, they can't look after the patient.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's so easy in those situations for people to put their own health issues and their own quality of life and things that we all need, time to ourselves, put those on hold and self-sacrifice for the person who's like for their partner or their parent or their child. And in
a lot
situation.
of times it doesn't take a severe illness either, but a lot of people sort of will put everything for them aside for their children,
right? And
which isn't a good thing.
Yeah, and it's a self-sacrifice that then you face the consequences of eventually.
Yeah, it catches up to you.
So I mean that I think this feels like a good transition into like where in this journey, Linda, were you inspired to become a living kidney donor? Maybe you could explain what that means to our audience and how that experience has influenced you.
Okay, I'm going to back up a little bit further. We were both blood donors, and we registered, at the time it was the Unrelated Bone Marrow Registry. Now I believe it's called One Match through blood.ca. But we registered to be bone marrow or stem cell donor. Unrelated, it's about a 1 in 7 million chance to be a match for someone. In 2002, I got a call saying I was a possible match for someone. Would I go through further testing? So in 2002, I donated bone marrow. 2003, I donated leukocytes. And 2004, I was one of the first unrelated people to donate stem cells through McMaster University.
Oh, wow.
So that, to me, that was sort of the start of my journey.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's quite the start, though. Like, what was... because some of those donations aren't, like, people have issues where if people who are squeamish, like giving blood is definitely a donation, but some of the bone marrow ones involve more procedures, more pain. Like there's more pain involved. There's more self-sacrifice from the donor.
The bone marrow was my first operation, other than wisdom teeth.
Yeah.
And they actually took out of both of my hips. They had 2 needles going into my hips to take out the amount of bone marrow they took. I don't know much. I actually sent cards, sort of anonymously, the same way Mike had. And all I know for sure is the surgeon that it slipped that it was off continent, and the amount they needed, they take between 500 and 1,500 mil, depending on the size of the person.
Mm-hmm.
They needed 600 mil from me. So Mike and I looked at each other and said, little person. The doctor says, no comment, but you've done your homework. So my gut feeling, it was a little boy in South America. All I know for sure, it was a little person off continent.
Yeah.
And I gave them 6 years that they probably would not have had.
Is that the motivation? Like, because, you don't know this person, and the motivation must come from somewhere for like deep. Like, do you see it as like a duty that you are healthy and able? And
I more saw it as being able to help someone.
Yeah.
With a lot of the advocacy we still continue to do to this day, I think of donors as heroes.
Mm-hmm.
But personally inside me, I just think I just help people. So
is that is that a modesty thing, you think, of just, Mike's nodding yes?
Mike's nodding yes.
That
I don't know. To me, it was just to help someone.
Yeah.
And I'll, circle back to, in January of 2019, I donated my right kidney. It was to a friend of ours. We were actually, in January of 2018, we were walking around the motorcycle show, and this friend, his health was dwindling. Like he was not a well man. In 2017, he'd been told he had to go on dialysis 8 days before his wedding.
Ugh.
He said, "Can I wait till after my honeymoon?" They said, "No. You won't make it to your wedding day if you don't start dialysis now."
Mm.
So he was a sick man.
Mm-hmm.
And so we were walking around the bike show in January of 2018. And just out of the blue, I said, "Lindsay," I said, "what's your blood type?" He said A positive, which is the same as mine.
Mm-hmm.
I turned to Mike and I says, "I'm giving him a kidney." Of course, that did not surprise Mike at all. And I started the process. I was actually the third person to start going through to see if I could be a match for him.
Mm-hmm.
He was overwhelmed when I called him and told him I was starting the process. Like, it was just...
I mean, I can't even imagine as a recipient what it feels like, because it's, it's so much more than just a donation of time or money or a material thing. Like, it's...
I gave him his life.
Yeah, and you did so by... Like, I guess you could speak to some of this, but it's not an insubstantial impact on your own health and life, right?
Well, it is major surgery.
Mm-hmm.
The testing that you have to go through before they will take you as a living donor is substantial.
Yeah, like stress testing on the body to ensure that you can...
almost every test imaginable, even a colonoscopy.
Mm-hmm.
I have a lot of allergies, so I had to go through allergy testing because they wanted to make sure everything that way was okay. Stress testing, a whole lot of blood work.
Yeah.
I often refer, if someone has a medical issue that they think that the medical profession is missing, offer to donate a kidney or part of your liver, because you'll go through every testing. I found out I had gallstones during that time. I found out that my left kidney actually had 2 arteries.
That's interesting. I think there's so I studied biology. I kind of got away. I went into more like plant science things, partly because I found myself being really squeamish in biology classes when you start learning about the human body. Just, you'd sit there and I'd be learning about the spine and I'd become hyper aware of my own spine and how it feels, and it just wasn't for me. But there's almost nothing typical about the human body, like the textbooks and things like that. You know, there's the diagram of like what things quote unquote should look like, but every single person is a unique situation, a unique case, and we don't discover those things about us until there's a medical event and things get imaged. And
so they ended up taking my right kidney where they normally would take the left kidney for a donation. And the kidneys, you think of them being sort of your lower back area, but the my recipient, if he pulls up his shirt, if you look at his belly, you can actually see the imprint, like the outline of the kidney.
Oh wow! So I've heard
because they actually put it in the front,
right?
Attach it more to what is referred to as the tree of life, like you're going up, and unless the old kidneys are extremely diseased or enlarged or are going to cause problems, they actually leave them there.
That's what I've heard, because it would be more trauma to the body to search. Because I mean, organs. That's the thing. Organs are not a game of operation where they're just slotted into a spot and cleanly, like, you know, we're a web of muscle and fibrous connective tissue, and like it's very complicated.
So I actually gave him a T-shirt that I got made saying, I have 3 kidneys, but 2 of them are decoys. And he is ex-military as well as Mike, so he really appreciated that.
Yeah. So I was going to ask how he was doing.
He's doing very well.
That's good.
He's actually moved out to Vancouver Island.
Okay.
And doing extremely well out there. So.
Well, that's good to hear. So sorry, Mike, what year did you receive your heart transplant?
2015 in July.
Okay. So it was like a year-ish later?
It's a few years later.
Yeah, a few years later.
2018, I started the process.
Yeah.
In 2019, I donated.
Now, I suspect that this dedication for donation and also just like the other ways it's impacted your life, this couldn't have happened in isolation. Like were both of you involved in causes of one degree or another, like beforehand, or involved in, like, you strike me as the type that this doesn't happen in isolations. This is a type of, like, you're already that type of person, that you're a giving person. You give your time, you give your...
We volunteer. We volunteer a lot. Have volunteered for many different things around the community over the years. And
well, that's great. I mean, that's what this podcast is all about, is talking to people who are growing, helping the city and helping the people of the city. And now your work goes beyond just Guelph, but maybe we could kind of get into, was it early on in the process that you had both sort of decided that you would like to become advocates for organ donation? And can you maybe talk to some of the initiatives that you've been involved in to promote awareness?
I think it was just a natural being able to raise awareness to help other people.
So some of the things we've done, we've raised the Be a Donor flag at City Hall. They have lights that they put on there, and green is the color for organ and tissue donation. So we've had them light up in green. We've been involved in high school outreach programs where you'll have either a recipient or donor, as well as a medical professional, will speak to a high school group about what organ or tissue donation means. We're getting the high school students at the age where they're about to probably go and get a driver's license. And one of the questions they ask is, would you like to be an organ donor? Because that goes on the back of your health card. And so when they show up at Service Ontario and get that question, oh, we talked about that in school. I remember that guy. He's 9 years out of a heart transplant and he's still looking great. And so we've done that. A group in the area has gotten together a few years, and we had a Be a Donor float in the Cambridge Santa Claus Parade. All different things like that. We've had a table at the Guelph Market a couple of times. Different things like that. Even, as I say, I've had my friend make up some different T-shirts just to start a conversation. I've got one that says, "Keep calm, it's only a heart transplant," or "Nice try, heart. I'm still here, but you're not." Different things that people read it, and it makes them want to ask, what does that mean? Did you really have a heart transplant? Or how can your heart not be here? And I've had good conversations with people all over. One time when we were doing the flag raising and a small presentation at City Hall, the mayor says, "I'm not sure if I'm a donor." And he looked on the back of his health card, and it didn't show that he was. He went up to his office with actually a different heart transplant recipient in Guelph, and she witnessed him going online, and he's now a donor. I had, not me on my own, but there was a pre-remembrance dinner the day before Remembrance Day, and I was talking with the mayor and his wife, and he says, "Oh, Be a Donor Month's coming up in April, isn't it?" And he says, "Yep. Okay, just wanted to make sure. Got to make sure that I'm free around that time." And so people remember that. A lot of people maybe signed up years ago. I signed up to be a donor when I joined the Armed Forces. It was a signature on paper, and you'd sign the back of your driver's license, and then that stayed for a while. But now, people who did that years ago, "Oh yeah, I signed up to be a donor," and when they get asked, when they renew either their driver's license or their license plate, "Oh yeah, I did that years ago." But it's different now. It's changed that it goes on the back of your health card, because when you go into the hospital, they scan your card, they see that you're a donor, and if you haven't updated, they don't know. So there's so many people that think they're registered who aren't. There's got to be 15 to 20% of the people who think they're donors that aren't registered. And something Linda and I always tell people, don't just do that on paper. Make sure your loved ones know.
Right.
Because if they don't know, they can actually say, "No, Mike wouldn't do that. No, we don't want him. We don't want to donate his organs, even if I'm registered." So make sure your loved ones know. That's so important.
So is the place, if listeners are wondering if they're in the same boat, they think they might have done that, is it the back of their driver's license that indicates it?
No, back of their health card.
Okay, so it's...
Or you can go in Ontario to beadonor.ca, and you can put in your health card number, and it will show if you're a donor. And there's about 3 or 4 pages of different things. You can say, "I want to donate my whole body." Something that's fairly common that surprised me, you can donate your whole body except your eyes, or, "I don't want to donate my heart because I feel that's where my soul is," things like that.
Different cultures have different, specific
some
beliefs
people
about
do.
that,
But there's not a single religion that goes against organ donation. So someone saying that is misinterpreting what they think they've heard.
Yeah. Well, it seems like there's obviously making the choice to be a living donor is a self-sacrifice that I think people have to kind of look into themselves and know if they're able to do that. But from my perspective, it seems like an easy choice to to be an organ donor in the event of an accident or an untimely event. Like, why not? Like, you're not using them at that point.
Well, even for people will often say, well, I'm too old. But the oldest sort of deceased organ donor was in their 90s, and tissue was late 90s. So
Wow.
People say, oh, well, I've had this disease, or, I've got this ailment. They won't want me.
Yeah.
No. If you're thinking you'd like to register and let the doctors decide at the time.
Yeah.
Because they can do more now than what they could even 10 years ago. Mm-hmm. We have a friend who he received a heart. His heart was not working properly. It was rejection was happening. So his body was rejecting the initial heart that was transplanted. He was approached. He's, we've got a heart. The only thing is the donor had hepatitis C. If you're willing to go through treatment, he said, there'll be no problem. So he received the heart, went through the treatment for hepatitis C, and he's doing wonderful.
Wow. I mean,
so, that, and organs from AIDS patients have gone into other AIDS patients, and they've just do so many things that, that's one of the reasons I actually promote, and I started with the beginning of COVID, May of 2020. I started making little hero bears. And with the little hero bear, they're about a foot high. I put a little heart on each of them, but I didn't want to just sell them. Mm. I was thinking, okay, the Heart Links, which is a support group for transplant patients and their families. We normally have a craft and bake sale at Toronto General every year. Mm-hmm. I knew that wasn't going to happen with COVID. In fact, they just had one last week. That was the first one since COVID at Toronto General. So I thought, okay, I put them up for adoption. In the past 4 years, and I always do it on Christmas Eve, it just feels nice that way. I've sent $5,500 to transplant research.
Oh, wow.
From the adoption of my little bears.
Is there, so obviously all the links that we'll talk about will be available in the show notes if people are interested, but this episode will be coming out, I think in mid-December. So where could people go to find out more about that auction to participate? And if you don't have the links yet, that's okay.
No, my bears, I normally have a few ahead, and when I get a pile of them, I take a picture of them and just put them on my Facebook page. Mm-hmm. It's word of mouth, just between friends and family.
Oh, that's great.
That I've so people could reach out to me. They could contact me via you probably that way, and if they'd like to. And I just put them up for adoption of $25, and the whole $25 goes to transplant research.
Well, that's great. Yeah, I mean, like you talked about how the medical science has come so far, and that people shouldn't think of themselves as like, well, I'm not an ideal donor, because, well, for one, there's probably no such thing as an ideal. Like we said, every human body is different, and there's let the medical professionals make those calls, because, like you said, you don't know who the donor recipient could be, and there's just so many ways that it could go right and go like be a match.
Yeah.
Are there any particular challenges that you've faced in your advocacy efforts, and maybe you could speak to overcoming those challenges?
One that I've heard some people say, and sometimes you just can't overcome it, is, well, if I give an organ, then when I come back the next time, I won't be able to come back because I'm missing an organ. And, you know, everybody's got different beliefs, but, you know, I don't personally think that would affect anything, because let's face it, after a period of time in the ground, you're just dust. Mm-hmm. But, you know, some people's minds are made up, and, you know, I don't feel if I can't convince someone, I don't want to argue with them.
Yeah.
It's just my thoughts. And
that makes sense, and that people would become... I would wonder how much I don't want to say an excuse, but a reason like that is really rooted in fear, in that it's an uncomfortable, scary topic, and having a belief like that, whether it's completely true to their heart or it's just an excuse that sort of closes the door, because that's a scary door for people. And
it's talking about death as well. Mm-hmm. And a lot of people don't want to do that. The other part that I know I've come across is if I'm listed as an organ donor and they need they go through, you see it on television and everything, and you think, they want an organ from me and I'm sort of on death's door, they won't try as hard. Yeah. Yeah. But we've actually know a family, and the daughter was in bad condition, and they realized that she was an organ donor. They actually transferred her to a larger hospital that would be able to procure her organs. Mm-hmm. And they saved her. Oh, wow. Because there was a doctor there who, being a larger center, I think I would be able to save this person. So they actually, because they were an organ donor and they were sent to a larger center, sort of to go through the final parts to become an organ donor, ended up saving their life. Hmm. And years later, they're still alive.
That's great.
So the medical profession, their first thing is to save you.
Yeah. I think that that sort of idea, it's the kind of conspiratorial thinking about the medical system in general, that it only really works if you can take the entire system and make it like an industry that's scary. And there's obviously issues with the Canadian medical system, of every medical system, but we're when you get down to it, like, what that kind of claim is saying is that an individual doctor or nurse or healthcare practitioner is going to make that decision of like, oh, well, I can let this person pass away in like a greedy sense. But like, I would challenge you to find any nurse or doctor who would like even entertain that kind of notion, right? It just goes completely against what they have dedicated their lives to, their day-to-day work, like,
and their oath.
Yeah, an oath that they've sworn. And yeah, I think that's the sort of thinking that it only works in isolation if you've never talked to a doctor or a nurse or something like that. So obviously anyone listening hopefully has either made the steps to double check their organ donation status, but beyond that registration, what are some actions that you'd encourage individuals in the Guelph and Wellington County the things that they can take to support organ donation and transplant efforts?
Well, right now I'm actually quite proud of what Guelph is. Guelph is 44% of eligible donors are actually registered.
Oh, wow. Do you know what does that compare to the average?
I think the highest on the website when I looked this morning was 59%.
Okay.
And we were trying to think of what it was, but we were thinking it was like 32 or 33 when we started advocating after Mike received his heart in 2015 for Guelph. So we have increased it quite a bit. The one thing that has really increased awareness in Canada and probably beyond as well is the Logan Boulet effect, or the Green Shirt Day. The Humboldt Bronco crash that was April 6th of 2018. And then the following year, he actually succumbed to his injuries on the 7th of April. And the following year, his family sort of,
This was one of the players on the team.
Yeah, he was one of the players. But his family developed Green Shirt Day for April 7th. And he was actually inspired. One of his coaches had passed away and had helped people. He was an organ donor. So he had helped people. And so Logan knew this. So just weeks before the Humboldt Broncos bus crash, he got his license and registered to be a donor and went home and talked to his family. So his family knew what his wishes were.
That's such an important part of the step, as you said before, but because so many medical decisions get put on family in times of crisis, and when those decisions have to be made, having those conversations ahead of time can give people relief, because there's so many emotions in play that I think people can't know how they're going to respond. And then, I can't imagine a heavier topic to get into than to talk about the choice of a parent and what to do with their dying child's organs. And rationality is going to go out the window. And I think that's a very normal. It would be abnormal to not have those sorts of, maybe in an abstract sense, or when we're sitting here around this table talking about it, we can say that they're not rational thoughts, but they're the thoughts that the parents are going to have, and having those conversations as a family ahead of time is just so critical to get through those times.
Yeah. I've actually, through our advocacy and awareness building of organ donation, we actually have a lot of friends and other people we've talked to that are donor families. And it's a horrific time when you're losing a loved one. And nothing is going to make that feel better at that time. But knowing your loved one's wishes make it that part is, you don't have to think about it.
Yeah.
You don't have to second guess yourself, second guess what they would want. You know what they'd like. And I've known some families who've actually approached and said, look, we know that our loved one is dying. What is the possibility of organ donation? They've approached the medical people rather than having the medical people approaching them.
Yeah.
Which makes, the process even easier. And knowing the loved one's wishes ahead of time makes that decision a lot easier.
Yeah.
But as well, in talking with many, many families, I've learned from most of them, they say, well, yeah, it didn't make that time any harder. In fact, it's made the grieving process a little easier because, our loved ones living on in someone else. They, through their death, they gave life. And it's really deep and emotional, but it's very important. The sort of the side of that as well, the other side, is a lot of transplant recipients. They feel guilty. My donor died to give me life. No. Your donor died, and because of his and or his family's wishes, was able to help keep you alive.
Yeah.
Organ donation is it's a treatment. It's not a cure, but it is a really good treatment.
Yeah. And it speaks to the, like you said, for the loved ones of the donor in an event like that. It's not going to change the sadness of that event and the impact of that, but it could turn the way you view the event, especially with a little bit of time, that it becomes a bit of a transformation. And that, people talk about, energy isn't created and destroyed, and regardless of people's religious beliefs, I think there's something that people can take solace in that the energy and the physical health that their loved one cultivated throughout their life didn't actually just end there. Like, who they were as a person, that ended, but it became a transference. It became a transformation for other people, and that, like, they don't have to look at it as a sacrifice or something to feel guilty of, but something to just to celebrate that we live in a time when our medical system can provide people with these medical miracles that would have been almost unthinkable a few hundred years ago, the stuff of science fiction, literally, and now they're saving people's lives. And I think that's a wonderful sentiment.
Yeah, I regularly say that I've kept my donor's heart beating, so I've kept a part of him alive for over 9 years now. And that's why I sort of jokingly also say that I make sure he gets a couple of good cups of coffee every day, because that was one of his favorite things.
Yeah. Does that, what does that mean for you, Mike, personally, of knowing that this critical part of you came from someone else, and that you're able to keep that alive? And
that's a hard thing to describe for me.
Yeah.
He had to be a hero to do that. As I say, so much about him was just like me. It felt like it was a perfect match, and I think from the doctor's point of view, they say the same, not because of the foods, the actions, the likes, dislikes, etc., but just it's working so well for me. And as I say, part of him is still alive.
Yeah. And I think there's so much there, if for people considering making the choice to become a donor, that's got to mean something. Just the fact that, our time on the earth is short and can be limited and uncertain, but that the fact that part of us can live on in that sense, that some of us, like that, like you said, the energy and the health that someone cultivates keeps going. I mean, it must be very interesting to be so deeply connected to a person that you've never met, and that you know a bit about them, but I'd assume you don't know what they look like. All of that's kept anonymous, right? So
all that's anonymous.
Yeah.
I know at least one parent had to have been alive when I got my letter, and either brothers or sisters or both, because they mentioned sort of inferred in the letter that it wasn't just siblings, that
right.
there was enough of the family.
Do you ever think, or have you had the thoughts in your head about the sort of sentiment or message that if you could have a conversation with either the donor or with their family member, and just does that situation ever play out in your head?
I would love to meet my donor's family. In some other countries, that information can be released if both parties are interested.
Right.
But in Ontario and I believe Canada, that information doesn't get passed along. Now, my friend Randy that I was talking about earlier, they had a video that the University Health Network, Toronto General Hospital, put on about him. And he was talking a little bit about when it happened and things like that. I got on Facebook a friend request from someone in Belleville because I'd posted about Randy's video. And I thought, I don't know anybody in in Belleville. Mm-hmm. But it turned out they were a nurse at Belleville Hospital. Mm-hmm. So I wondered, because I have been to Belleville Hospital before, nothing specifically heart-related or anything, but I wondered if it was someone there. So I thought, okay, got in contact with them. And they said, the video you posted, I think your friend has my husband's heart. He passed away from a brain aneurysm. And so I think I was speaking with her back and forth on Facebook, and Linda got our friend Randy on the phone, and they were asking questions of each other back and forth. And sure enough, there was enough that, the letter he sent matched what she'd received.
Yeah. It lined up that it was likely.
So they actually got in touch, and he went down to Belleville and met, and it was her husband's heart.
I can't even imagine what, just the emotions at that meeting. Like, good and I wouldn't say bad. They're just heavy and strong emotions that something like that can bring up. Mm-hmm. Do either of you have any opinions on Ontario's laws regarding the sharing? Like, I'm sure there are good and justifiable reasons for protecting people, but especially if both members were interested and eager to share and to meet that, like, why do we limit that now?
One of the reasons I've heard given, and I can understand that to a certain extent, is if either the donor or the recipient were possibly rich, well, my son, brother, sister, whatever, saved your life. Don't you think you owe us money now?
Yeah.
And that's a big concern.
Yeah.
And then how can you track it down that you're 100% certain?
Right.
I know in Randy's case, some of the words from his letter were identical to what she received, right down to the paper he'd written it on. Mm. He'd sent it on blue paper with clouds, and that's what she'd gotten.
Gotcha.
So it was no question, but
yeah,
sometimes I heard Mike had a heart transplant. I'm going to tell him it might have been my brother.
Yeah.
And that, how can you prove or disprove? It's hard.
Yeah.
It's difficult. And, if they don't release information, that'll help protect against scams.
Yeah, that's fair. I guess it also protects against, because organ donation is an arduous process on everyone and for the donor, and they're not always successful. There's not always good outcomes, and you can think of it as a situation like, why wouldn't the family of the donor want to know if everything's been great and someone's having an extended life? But that's not always going to be the case, and the hardship that could happen if there's a failed transplant, if there's health complications and someone passes away afterwards, or even just to go to the level of, if someone thinks, my loved one gave you X organ, and now I see you drinking. Now I see you smoking. Like, you know what I mean? There's just those things of like, how dare you do that to, and now someone else's choices are being colored and being influenced by that. That makes sense. But yeah. Mm-hmm.
Where my kidney recipient, he was a friend before.
Yeah. Which it's a different situation because you know who you're.
And he was a close friend. In fact, Mike and him referred to each other as closer to each other than their own brothers.
Wow.
And now that bond is even closer. It's one of those undescribable bonds, actually.
Yeah, we don't have the words in English to properly convey what that brings up, because it's almost like making someone family, or making someone like what it means to be blood related in those ways, but to make the choices to become connected through tissue and organ, and like I don't know, it's almost bizarre to talk about because it's such an intimate.
Well, another shirt that I actually got made for him and presented to him on his birthday the year after we had done the donation. He often referred to the fact that his kidney was older because I'm a year older than him. But the one that I got is, I fell asleep and I woke up with lady parts. And then, I had the kidneys underneath, but he likes to sort of sit with that part of the shirt hidden behind a table.
Yeah.
Just to get the reaction of people. And he's become an advocate for organ and tissue donation as well, because he's got my kidney in him and it's keeping him alive.
Yeah.
It took about a year for the process, all the testing and everything from the time I said, yes, I will, to actually donating. And I was a good match for him. And during that year, he was told, if it doesn't work with Linda coming through and giving you a kidney, you're out of time. So we know that without the donation, he would not be here. I know for a fact, 2 days before we got the call, we were actually down at Toronto General for a clinic appointment for Mike. And they said, yeah, it'll probably be 1.5 to 2 years before you start getting calls. And you'll probably have 5 or 6 dry runs where you'll come down as a backup and, go back home. What they call a dry run. And so we were, I was actually packing the vehicle, getting ready to take him up to the motorcycle racing, which we both volunteer with. He wasn't volunteering at the time because he was too weak, but he still wanted to go, and I'd sit him up in a chair and he'd sort of watch and holler out to me in his weakened voice if he saw something that I didn't see at the time. Mm-hmm. But he got the call. We went down, and he was going down as a backup. Well, got him down there about 2:30 in the afternoon. About 6:30, I heard the nurses, he's gone home, he's up. Nah, too good to be true. A few minutes later, one of them comes in and says, yep, we got to do more prep work. We think this heart is for you. And with that, it was 11 o'clock that night. They took him into surgery.
Wow.
But when they told him 2 days before that, it'd be 1.5 to 2 years, he just looked at me. He didn't have 2 months left in him. And we both knew that. I don't think either one of us said it at the time, because it's one of those things that you don't want to say.
Yeah.
But yeah, he did not have 2 months left in him. He would not, if it had to taken, 3 or 4 months for him to get the call to go down to get a heart, he wouldn't have been there.
Yeah. Well, I'm certainly glad that the story turned out differently, Mike, and that you're both of you are here to help share the message. Do you have any future projects or goals along with your advocacy efforts that you'd like our listeners to hear?
The main thing, like I say, is continuing what we're doing. Please, everyone, check that you're registered. Look on your health card. Go to beadonor.ca, and you can enter your health card number, and it'll show you if you are registered. And really, talk to your loved ones, family, friends. It's not an easy conversation, but it's something that needs to be done.
Yeah.
We need more people as donors because people are dying every day.
Yeah. And it's not an easy conversation, but it's certainly easier to have had that conversation than to not have it, never be able to have it, and wonder and be forced into making those sorts of decisions for other people.
Yeah. And especially if you think, I've abused my body for the whole time, still register. Let the doctors decide. I heard of a case where there was someone who'd been a lifetime smoker, passed away. Someone needed lungs, and they thought, well, this person's a match. They have been a smoker, but, this person will die without something. And they thought they were just going to check and see if there was any possibility that the lungs might be viable. Strangely enough, after being a lifetime smoker, the lungs were just as pink could be. And they were a perfect match. Yeah. And that person is still alive today. So wow. Don't rule yourself out.
Yeah.
Let the doctors do that.
And don't, this is not an encouragement for people to smoke or anything like that, but I've already said a few times, the human body is a wondrous and mysterious sort of thing, and what is debilitating for some person, some people just got the right mix of genetics and aptitude for something that, despite a lifetime of trying, their organs are healthy and able to give. And something I thought of earlier that I personally don't think of blood donation in this way, but, blood is one of it's not a traditional organ in that thing. The way we think of it, it's a tissue, but the fact that anyone can walk, or almost anyone with limitations and restrictions and whatnot, but so many people can walk in off the street and donate something that's just so critical for life that, that's an amazing thing that we have a prosperous enough medical system in a country that, they're standing by waiting. And I did that recently after not having done it for years. And it made me just think why don't I do this more often?
As they say, blood, it's in you to give.
Yeah. One of the better slogans that the medical industry has come up with.
Actually, blood.ca has recently gotten more involved. They were the ones that sort of involved with the bone marrow and stem cell donations, but they're now extremely involved with the organ donor as well.
That's good.
So you can go
they
on.
They have an app and they have quite the network and resources.
You can go on blood.ca and learn information that way. And the beadonor.ca, if you click on to register or to check, it actually takes you to the Service Ontario website, as Mike said. And if you have your health card with you, you can check to see if you're a donor and what code that
good.
You've got.
Well, I think that's a good maybe final place to end our conversation, is just a reminder for people to think about these things, check your own status, and have those kinds of conversations.
And talk to your family and friends.
Yeah, talk to your family and friends during the times when it's not a crisis, when there's not other medical issues happening, and when there's, because that's probably the time where it's hardest to want to steer the conversation towards something heavy like death, but where, like we kind of said before, there's no better time to have those conversations have to happen inevitably. So have them when people are in good spirits and good moods, and maybe while you're around the various holiday gatherings and tables and things like that. It's it's the spirit and it's the season of
Christmas
giving
coming up. Yeah.
Yeah. So, any final thoughts for how our listeners can get involved? Or I think we've given people a lot of things to do, but any final thoughts for people?
I think you pretty much hit the nail on the head. Is make the conversation, check that you're registered, and if you do that, and again, that suggestion about being a blood donor, I'm not available or able to give blood now because of all the anti-rejection medications that I take. But when I was able, I made over 160 whole blood donations in my life.
Wow.
So, it's in you to give.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, thanks so much, Mike and Linda, for joining and sharing your stories today.
And thanks for having us.
Yeah, thanks for the opportunity to raise awareness and educate people.
Well, it's the least I can do, but yeah, good luck for all the future fundraising goals and things that you have coming up. And if anyone's interested, there's lots of links in the show notes to check out. Thanks for listening to Growing Guelph. I've been your host, Jordan Sloggett. Be sure to subscribe to us on social media, on your favorite podcast app, and if you have a recommendation for a future guest you'd like me to speak to, you can reach out to me at growingguelph@gmail.com.